Greetings and welcome to this interaction series session supporting your implementation of our SBC Way breakthrough curriculum. My name is James Busey and I'm your host for this session. Today's session is entitled Understanding Word Level Learning. Ever so slightly different to what was originally advertised, and there's a reason for that. This session is equally valid if you're exploring writing, reading, or listening and talking, because word level learning happens across all three components of literacy. So the purpose of today's session, well, there's a number. We want to explore delivering word level component of the SBC Way breakthrough curriculum. And by the end, we hope that you understand the holistic literacy approach, that we've explored the 4 parts to word level learning, that you'll be familiar and aware of the progression documentation, and you know where to find supporting information. That's what we want to get out of today's session. This session, as with all of these Into Action series, will follow a very similar format. Core input, an opportunity to pause and reflect with some questions, and a follow-up activity. And with all of that, the intention that you will then have a new form of understanding that we've helped to develop. Don't forget that with all things SBC Way, and particularly all things related to the curriculum, you can find everything you need on the SBC Way Launchpad. The QR code on the screen will direct you to it, and if you haven't already added it as a favorite on your iPad or on your device, please do so. Everything you need for what we're speaking about today would be found in Core Business, our breakthrough curriculum, and then you're looking for literacy framework. And specifically, there'll be elements of the writing curriculum that we will be delving into, but the messages are relevant across reading and listening and talking as well. Okay, so just a little bit of a reminder of what we're doing here overall. Writing, the SBC Way, which is built on the best evidence and research. And so we have this simple view of writing, and we're thinking about text generation, transcription, and executive function. And these 3 components of the simple view of writing, we have then added these supporting foundations of oracy, of a knowledge-rich curriculum, of reading, of writing across a range of genres, and the importance of purpose and motivation to write. And it is with the context of this holistic approach to writing that we need to think and consider today. But don't forget that we're talking about holistic approach to literacy. So it's writing and it's reading. So the SBC Way approach to reading, which is primarily based on the 5 pillars, but it's also built on the work of Scarborough's reading rope, as well as the simple view of reading. And those 5 pillars are built on the foundations of oracy, of a knowledge-rich curriculum of writing, and the recognition that as text complexity increases, our ability to read increases also. And the 3rd part of the literacy wheel is what we have based our listening and talking approach to, our approach on, which is the oracy framework developed by Oracy Cambridge or Cambridge University. So our listening and talking curriculum takes this theoretical framework to underpin. So we've got our writing, our reading, and our listening and talking. These all built on the important and the best thinking and evidence and literature that's available. And you link it all together so that we can enable our children and young people to become literate. We don't just want them to become writers or readers or listeners or talkers. We want them to become literate. So we need to think about literacy as a joined up endeavor, but we also need to think about it in its component parts. And if we can do both, think about component parts and think about it as a joint endeavor, we're not going to go far wrong. Today, we're thinking about word level learning. And word level learning, according to research and literature, is made up of 4 parts. To support connected and robust learning, teachers and practitioners should focus on the 4 aspects of word level learning in their classroom. That is word recognition, word knowledge, word writing, and word choice. This allows for varied and distributed practice to occur, with children having multiple opportunities to learn and apply knowledge in a variety of contexts. It's also important to remember that we're talking about literacy across the curriculum. So these 4 elements should be considered at every and any opportunity to develop word level learning. At word level, writers engage in various language-related processes to choose appropriate vocabulary, construct individual words. It includes selecting words that accurately convey their intended meaning, considering things like synonyms, antonyms, word connotations. Writers need to attend to spelling, and then there's the morphology, prefixes, suffixes, we'll come on to that, to ensure the correct word formation. Word level skills are crucial for building a rich and precise vocabulary that effectively communicates the writer's ideas. So let's spend the next bit of this session digging into that. I'm going to ask you just to pause and reflect on what I just shared, though, those 4 parts and the holistic approach. So 2 questions, and your facilitator will guide you through this and decide how much time you want to discuss. Why does word level learning need to be explored as a holistic literacy approach? And how does the 4-part model for word level learning sit with your existing practice? 2 questions for you to consider before you move on. Pause the video and then click play when you're ready. Okay, then let's go. So if we remember that we've got the SPC writing curriculum and we've got the view of writing and our foundational pillars, we're focusing very much on word level, thinking about spelling, but we've also, you can't get away from thinking about sentence level and the importance of handwriting and pencil grip. So these are some of the things that we'll explore together. We need to remember that words are simply the building blocks of broader text. So letters and words are then building together to make sentences and paragraphs and texts. For that reason, it's very difficult to just talk about words on their own without removing the need to think about words in the context of a sentence or a paragraph or a full text of some sort. But we can do it. So that's again goes back to component parts, but ideally a holistic approach. So words fit into those component parts. We have a progression. We have a progression documentation. And if we think about what word level learning, how that is articulated in the progressions, well, again, it's woven through, because the progression and the E's and O's and the benchmarks, they don't have specific focus on words. They talk about use of words, they think about spelling of words, they talk about building sentences. So we've woven all of the core progression into different components. But if you look at early level, for example, we know that early level word building goes from very early initial mark making through to kind of more recognizable mark making, to clumping some of those marks together to create words, or what we believe to be words or interpreted words, to eventually writing a sentence, comprehensible sentence at the end of early level. If we then look at first level, we're looking to build on the ability to build a sentence. But building a sentence needs the understanding of individual words. So we need to use our phonics to build words. We need to use our spelling patterns to build words. And we need to use our understanding of vocabulary to interpret and choose words. And we'll come into this in more detail. But we don't use words on their own. We use words in context. So we use words when we're building sentences. So again, you can't necessarily draw out word level progression because it's integral to sentence, paragraph, text level. But you can have a look and see there is a particular focus on vocabulary and development and use of vocabulary. And there's a particular focus here on different types of grammar or types of words within a sentence. Similar at second level, exactly the same idea. Words aren't on their own progressive, but our use of words is. And that's how our progression supports the development of word level. However, having said all of that, we absolutely do have a progression for building words, going from that initial mark making, and then we think about phonemic awareness and phonics. So we have a phonics program, a phonics progression. We then have a word list progression where we're taking those initial ideas, or those, sorry, not those initial ideas, those sound patterns, those graphemes, and building and sharing examples of the types of words that over time then children should be introduced to and should be able to use in their writing. Okay. So let's dig in and ask you to think about, why do you think it is so difficult to separate word level learning out from wider literacy learning? Pause the video, have a discussion, and you can click play when your facilitator is ready. Right, so I said that we were going to be looking at the four-part model of word level learning. So we know what these four parts are and why they're important. So let's dig deep into each of them. The first one we're going to look at is word recognition. So there, and what we're going to do as we go forward now is think about how we can develop these four parts. What does it mean in practice in the classroom? So for word recognition, there are, according to the literature, there's lots of different ways, but these are three deemed to be the most effective. So if you're going to do anything, do these three things. So again, the challenge is in your practice, what are you doing to develop word recognition? Are you ensuring plenty of quality opportunity for dialogue and discussion about words? Have you considered and do you use repeated reading? And have you considered and do you use word breaking? So let's look at those individually. If we think about dialogue and discussion, it links directly to our listening and talking progression framework and the oracy framework. So are we, when we're talking about words, when we're recognizing words, are we providing opportunities to talk about those words? Are we recognizing words in spoken language? Do we say, oh, that was an interesting word you just used. Let's talk about that and celebrate that. When we're watching Newsround or we've got something on the screen through the iPad, are we saying, oh, that was an interesting word. Has anyone heard that before? So we need to use opportunities through spoken texts, but also in conversation, through carpet time, through discussions, through dialogue, to develop an appreciation and awareness of words. How can we develop it? Well, we can also do repeated reading. So repeated reading, which is just quite simply providing multiple opportunities to be exposed to words so that we recognize more and more and they become more familiar with us. Now, that is not to say that repeated reading replaces learning to decode. What we are not wanting children to do is to learn to read all words by sight. But repeated reading does have, according to the literature, a very specific purpose. So we can do repeated reading through an adult to child, and that's particularly appropriate to earlier stages of learning to read and write. But through reading, we can be introduced to more words and we can talk about those words. But we can also do it peer-to-peer, so opportunities to read texts that are familiar to us and revisiting them over and over. And we can also do that ourselves independently, as we not so much read the same text over and over again, but we read familiar text or similar text, and we start to draw and we recognize phrases and terminology because the texts that we're reading are using similar phrases. So according to the literature, researchers found that repeated reading can lead to improvements in word recognition, accuracy, expression, fluency, comprehension, and writing. To address student motivation and engagement with repeated reading, organizational structures such as choral, echo, and partner reading can be used. And this is how you can't always distinguish between writing and reading. We learn words through reading and then we can use them in our writing, but we do need to know how to spell them. That's where the word breaking comes in. So I've seen a word, I know a word. How do we understand it? How do we use our knowledge of alphabet, our knowledge of phonemes, of graphemes to build words? And there are three key approaches. There is what's called diacritical marking. You can see on the screen there, diacritical marking is where you assign a symbol to a type of phoneme. So a single phoneme where one letter has one sound, that's a dot. A joined phoneme, and that would often be a grapheme, is where you have two letters joined together, makes one sound, that's a line. And you can have a split phoneme where you have two letters make one sound, but they are interrupted by another letter or letters, and they're joined using that arch. So you can use that approach very, very simply to help children explore words, break words down into their component parts. Now, you do need to have, children do need to have a good understanding of phonics. They need to know the sounds first, but it doesn't mean you can't do it straight away. So if you know, if you're just doing sat pin was your first few phonics, you can start to do diacritical marking straight away because you can break it down into its component individual phonemes. The second thing is Elkanin boxes. So an Elkanin box is where you break the word down into its component sounds, but you put those sounds into the boxes. So here we've got the word shop, and you can put the dots. This is sometimes known as a sound button. So you put a sound button underneath. You can use different colors for if it's a more than one letter. So you've got sh, op, 3 sounds, and you build it into those Elkanin boxes. And it does not need anything fancy. That just needs a whiteboard and a pen, or if you've got your iPad, you can create a template and you send it out and then they mark it up and then rub it out. It doesn't need to be fancy Elkanin boxes. And the third part is multisyllabic, more easy for you to say, multisyllabic marking. So reading and deconstructing multisyllabic words often involves drawing on phonological, phonic, orthographic, and morphemic knowledge. Many multisyllabic words will have at least one schwa sound, and that's an interesting term, and it's the unstressed sounds that we get in words, and it's used in multiple different sounds. Is the unstressed syllable or syllables. So we can take here terminal. Let's break it down into its syllables. Ter-mi-nal, 3 syllables. Conduction, conduction. Break it down. So we're looking at how we can take words down into different parts using our knowledge of phonemes and morphemes, etc. Word breaking, a really important component of introducing and teaching word level learning. So let me ask you, I'm going to ask you to pause and stop. Dialogue and discussion, repeated reading, or word breaking. My question to you is, do you regularly provide opportunities for all 3 of these approaches? Which works well for you, or what works well for you, and what would you say needs to be developed? I'll let you pause the video and your facilitator will click play when you're ready to start again. Okay, so that was word recognition. Now let's talk about word knowledge, our understanding and awareness of different words and where they come from and how we can use them. This ultimately refers to vocabulary, and there's a brilliant Isabel Beck, I believe is her name, certainly Beck, Isabel Beck, suggested the idea that there are 3 tiers of vocabulary. Tier 1, everyday words familiar to most children. Walk, chair, so I went for a walk, or I will sit on my chair. Tier 2 words are those that appear frequently across several topics. There's an example there is emerge or peculiar, but they can also be words that would be an alternative to the more common words. So instead of saying said, it might be I suggest. Those kind of synonyms would fit nicely into tier 2. And then you have tier 3, which are the less common topic-specific words, or sometimes quite technical words. They've given examples there, photosynthesis and denominator. And the suggestion from the experts is that it's when pre-teaching and discussing any new word, it's useful for teachers to consider how the tier 2 words is where we should focus our time and energy. Tier 1 words, we learn through osmosis. We will pick them up through conversation, through the playground, etc. Tier 3 words, they are very unique and very rarely needed out with a specific subject. Tier 2 words enable us to communicate and write effectively across a variety of genres and for a variety of purposes and across the curriculum. So how might we explore this idea of word knowledge? Again, dialogue and discussion. We can have joint construction of definitions, and we can use word maps. What do we mean by these? Again, dialogue and discussion, unsurprisingly, we can develop an understanding of new words, an appreciation for new words through conversation, but also through, as a teacher, stopping and purposefully bringing attention to new words. So when I say dialogue and discussion, I don't mean only through talk, but I mean you using talk to bring attention to words. So when you are reading a text, knowing the words that are going to be important or that might be new or tricky, introducing them beforehand, purposefully exploring or explaining what they mean, and then carrying on with that bit of the story or that bit of text. So using dialogue and discussion to explore new words. This idea of joint construction of definitions is a really interesting one. Again, according to the literature and research, students' understanding of words can be developed through the joint construction of definitions. Now, interestingly, this practice is shown to be more effective than just the use of dictionary definitions alone. So you can find a word, you can get the definition of a word, but the best way to support children to use that word is through discussing the word and sharing examples and then coming up with a joint definition. So here's an example. The word insulator. Insulator. So what makes copper or a conductor and rubber an insulator? Well, insulator, what do we mean? Let's break that down. Okay, so insulate is to protect or stop. It's the opposite of conduct, is it? And a tour is a personal thing that performs an act. Okay, right? Bring those together. So it must be a material that stops the flow of electricity. That isn't necessarily the dictionary definition, but it's one that we've constructed together by bringing our understanding of real fact, but us generating a new idea. That ties in ever so well with the science of learning, whereby if we generate using our new knowledge, we generate something new, we are able to use it and learn it and remember it much better. So a joint construction of definitions is a powerful way to explore word knowledge. And the third part is to use word maps. Here is an example of a Freya model. Really simple. Graphic organizers like these are really, really effective for helping children and young people, in fact, everybody learn. If we can visualize something, we can break it down. So a word map or Freya model, very simply, you put the word in the middle, you look for these 4 different parts: definition, characteristics, examples, and non-examples. And you can see on the screen here one completed for you. So the reptile, definition, characteristics, examples, non-examples. Completing this task or activity with a new word brings depth of understanding, brings depth of appreciation, allows you to think about how it could be used, how it shouldn't be used. I like the non-example bit because that helps you to address any misconceptions or errors. So word maps and Freya models are a really good example of this, are really good ways to explore and deepen knowledge when we're talking about the idea of word knowledge. Okay, so another pause. Dialogue and discussion, joint construction of definitions, word maps. Do you regularly provide opportunities for all 3 of these approaches? If you do, what works well for you? If you don't, what needs to develop? Pause the video, have a conversation, and your facilitator will feedback from you and click play when you're ready to continue. So now we're looking at word writing. And I should add here that this is a pretty significant part of the word level learning. And actually there isn't enough time to do all of that in this session tonight. We do have a part 2 to word level learning, which goes really deeply into the ideas behind some of the micro elements of word writing. But I will provide an overview of some important considerations and headlines for you to think about. When we think about word writing, there's these 3 main components. It's about going from letters, forming letters to forming words, when we need to use our systematic synthetic phonics, and we need to think about morphology. Now, the emerging literacy it was something that as an authority we did a number of years ago. We introduced, we invested a huge amount of time and energy in a long time ago. And there are many settings who are doing this excellently. But we need to make sure that all of our settings are using the principles of emerging literacy, the approaches, the learning, because it is fundamental to ensuring high quality writing and certainly pre-writing. So this is just an important reminder that when we're talking about the mechanics of writing, when we're thinking about actually mark making, there are 3 stages. You've got the idea of the shoulder pivot, stage 1. Stage 2 is the elbow pivot, and stage 3 is the wrist pivot. And all 3 of these are important. And we as teachers and as practitioners need to provide opportunities for all of those. And that isn't just in our ELKs and our nurseries. This goes into primary 1 as well. I love this quote. It's the brain that learns to write, not the hand. This means that a child can be working on their pre-writing skills without a pencil in their hand. So how do we do some of that? How do we provide those opportunities? So in nurseries and in primary 1, ELKs and primary 1s, think about your learning environment. There are so many settings who are doing this brilliantly, but we need to be getting this out and out in all of our classrooms. So are we providing opportunities through sound and water, finger gym, a tinkering table, building blocks, Play-Doh, soft start activities, where we are developing both that, all of those different pivots, and then ultimately down to that fine finger skills. We then need to think about the supporting pencil grip. Those finger skills before you even picked up a pencil are building the muscles, are getting muscle memory. But we need to be thinking about development of a pencil grip. We need to be supporting posture. We need to provide opportunities to warm up for writing. We need to do progression from creating text orally to independently writing. And oral creation of text is important. And then we go away and we try and write it. We believe we're writing. It's all important. It's all part of the development. So that emerging literacy approach to mark making and initial word building is absolutely vital to have in our early level, primary 1 into primary 1-2. Play-based learning approaches are so key, because then we also, and arguably not after this, but at the same time, we need to be thinking about our systematic synthetic phonics and how we are teaching children about our language system. We have a brilliantly complex language system, which is phonetic in nature, as opposed to other alphabetic or other language systems. So we have a phonetic language system, so we need to learn the phonics. And some very clever people have recognized that across the English language, you can break the sounds, the phonemes, the sounds of our language down to about 44 unique sounds. So we have 26 letters that we use to make 44 sounds. Those 44 sounds can be spelled in about 100 and something different ways. Okay, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. 26 letters, 44 sounds, 100 plus alternative ways to spell those sounds. So our language is complex. But because we've got this code, we can use this code to write and to learn to spell thousands of words. We don't need to know how to spell thousands of words. We can learn using the code to spell all of these words. Then they become ingrained, because the more we use them, the more we know them, and they become transferred into long-term memory through the act of repeated use. And again, this is where we've got this paradigm going on where reading and writing happen at the same time. So to spell a word is to encode it, the process of hearing a sound that's been spoken out loud and writing it down using the appropriate written symbol. That's a grapheme. We write graphemes, but reading is we hear the phonemes. So decoding is the process of identifying the spoken sounds represented by individual letters or groups of letters. That's a phoneme. So reading is decoding, spelling is encoding. And we need to know about the fact that there's two sides of the same coin. So we can't split it. So this session that you're involved with today is as much as important to reading, progression and learning as it is to writing and etc. So what we've got in our SPC Way curriculum, we have got a very, very clear approach to the simple code, the simple code being those 44 phonemes. How do we ensure that all children know those 44 phonemes and are learning those 44 phonemes? We then go on to exploring one alternative, which starts to edge towards the complex code. We then begin to introduce the complex code. And by the end of first level, we're building the complex code so that those original 44 phonemes and appropriate graphemes, we're then getting more alternatives to how we can use them. And we can use them to build more and more words. We have a variety, and I hinted at these earlier, we have a variety of programs and supports available. So we have our phonics progression there, we've got phonics mats, we've got word lists, all of them linked into this phonics progression. Then when you get into second level, you're then starting to think more about how you can extend that complex code, making sure that you know all those different ways to spell those original basic code, the simple code sounds. But we need to know how to spell them all so that we can spell increasingly complex words. But then we also need to start thinking about this idea of morphology. And morphology is about how breaking words down into their component parts. We can think about prefixes and suffixes, and we can talk about etymology, which is how we've got different languages like Latin and Greek, which are embedded in our language system. So when we're learning to write words, we need to be able to spell with component parts, whether that be the component phonemes, the alternative different graphemes, and then the component parts, whether it be prefix, suffix, etc. So just for today, when we're thinking about morphology, there's a couple of nice ways that we can encourage, and this is the second level particularly, and encourage that. So this is what's called a word sum. So a word sum is a nice way to think about building words. So if you've got the root there of rupt, you can have disrupt, dis plus rupt plus if, etc. And it's helping learners to break it down into their component parts. Another way to think about it here, and this is called a word matrix. Forgot what it was called just then. A word matrix. I don't know how well you can see it on the screen here, but if you've got your core root, so core root here is star, and then you can have some prefixes to it, then you can have some different additions to it, and using that one, you can see how many different words you can build using that one root part. Now this is fun, it's enjoyable, but it's interesting and it's meaningful, and it helps children appreciate that actually so many words are linked in to a core starting point. So we can think about using different approaches to build words. As I said, this is just a very brief overview. The idea of the phonics, the systematic syntactic phonics, there's a follow-up to today's session, which is diving deeply into that. So if you think that's appropriate, then please do look out for that one. But for today, it was more about saying there's the component parts of reading, which is going from letters to words, then thinking about the phonics and thinking about morphology. So my pose and pause question to you is, are you as a school using the emerging literacy approaches? If you're not, you need to reach out to your early years teacher team, and they will support you with that, because that is so important in our schools. Do you have a simple to complex code approach to phonics? Or do you stop at the first 44? And if you do, you're not supporting your learners to be able to spell as well as they could. And how do you explore morphology? How do you help children to break words down into its component parts, to play with words, to see connections across words? Pause the video, discuss these questions, and you can click play when you're ready. Okay, you're doing well. The end is in sight. We are getting towards the final part of our session. So we're going to talk about word choice. And this is really about helping children think about, when they are writing, which word is the right word to use. So word choice, again, top 3 best wins. You can use word banks. You can do word sorting. And you can use quite a fun little approach called word wizard. And again, according to the literature, these 3 approaches are your best bets for helping children to use words appropriately and choose the right words to use. So word banks, they're a written list of key subject-specific vocabulary words or phrases for pupils to draw from when they're writing. They're a simple yet powerful teaching resource that familiarizes pupils with a specific group of words and helps promote independent work. We know that most pupils, especially younger, more reluctant writers, can find it challenging to include specific details in their writing. So word banks can be used to enhance writing lessons. Their versatility means they can be used for a variety of subjects. And you can see just examples here. Brilliant to see a wall in a classroom used as a live interactive word wall where new words are added. I love this one, that they're handwritten. It's not computer printed. This teacher's clearly just got some coloured cards in their desk, and then when a new word comes up, add it to the collection, add it to the word wall, talk about it, get kids excited about it, challenge them to use it next time in their writing. Here's an alternative where actually you've got your kind of, and this is a nice way of building a bank of synonyms. So different words you could use instead of happy or instead of pretty. How do we get children to use more interesting vocabulary? And here is just an example that you can get from Twinkle. I know Twinkle has lots of problems, but to the same extent, we need to work smarter, not harder. And if there is a resource that is quality and a resource that helps us, then why not download that and have that available? So here's a word bank that helps us think about replacements for said. Word banks. I'm sure many of us use word banks. If you don't, it's a really powerful tool, and it should be the feature of every classroom. With word banks and with words, another teaching approach, pedagogical tool, is what's called word sorting. Again, it might seem very, very straightforward, but there's different types of word sorting. So we can do word sorting as soon as we have learned a sound, as soon as we've got an understanding of a phoneme, or one of whether that be simple code or complex code. And we can sort words. This is a nice way to read, or you can write. So this has been done by reading, but there's no reason at all why you couldn't have a task or an activity which is using those different graphemes, and then children need to write words into the corresponding section. You can categorize words by word type. So here we've got noun, verb, adjective, getting the children and young people to think about the different types. Or here, just by activity. So words that are linked to, and you can't see the top, but words that are linked to clothing or weather or foods or farming. Just getting children to play with, think about, discuss, best done in groups, types of words that they're exploring. And the third version, this is relatively new to me, but again, it's available in the literature, and it's what's called Word Wizard. So Word Wizard, it's a motivational device that can be used to encourage students to notice words in the environment beyond their classroom. And again, it's Beck, who came up with the 3 tiers of vocabulary, who has recommended this as a powerful tool. Often used where a teacher might establish a system for earning points, table points, or just for fun, for hearing, seeing, or using new words outside of the classroom. So to earn points, students would need to describe the context in which the focus words were used. So this strategy can be adapted in many ways with the aim of developing students' word consciousness and an enjoyment of words. And you can see on the screen there just examples of where they found the word. So the word here was conduct. Different, the word here was sales. And the word that they used here was particles. Now, second level learning, but they were able to find it, but they also, interesting link to source of it. Where did you get it from? Okay, let's talk about the source of the text. And what's nice is they're not necessarily reading it all, they could be hearing it as well. Okay, so that's the fourth part of the model, where we're thinking about thinking about words. So reflective questions for you. Pause the video, please. Word banks, word sorting, word wizards. How are you currently supporting word choice? How could you develop your practice in this area? Pause the video and your facilitator will get you to feedback your thoughts on this part, and then click play when you're ready. Very, very near the end now. An important part, though, is we are so fortunate in SBC to have to be an Apple authority, to be Inspire Learning authority, to have digital tools at our fingertips, and for primary 4 upwards to have a one-to-one device. Really, really amazing opportunity. And we need to be exploring how we can use those tools more and more. So just on the screen there, you can see a few different tools that could be used to support word level learning, whether that be through speech to text, whether that be through something like Notes app, where children are storing their own version or their own word banks, whether it be through Caligo, where they're developing their handwriting skills, but it could also, they can be practicing their spelling through handwriting. They can be practicing their morphology and splitting through Caligo, whether it be through Pages, because they're using that to do their writing, whether it be Shobi, because they're showcasing, or you as a teacher are using Shobi to share word banks, to share Freya models, to share your Elkin boxes. We have so many tools available. The QR code here directly links to the recent early level toolkit that is available to our early level practitioners to support use of the iPads. But we also have a huge amount of support available on the Inspire Learning portal, again available on the Launchpad. Remember, if in doubt, go to the Launchpad. So what am I asking you to do today? Well, other than to have engaged and to listen and to think, I'm asking you to do 3 things. I'm asking you to reflect on your current practice to do with word level learning. And if word level learning, we've got those 4 components where we know that word level learning is made up of word recognition, word knowledge, word writing, and word choice. I want you to reflect on those 4 parts. How effectively are you enabling those 4 parts in your practice? I then want you to explore using some of the suggestions from today's session and the supporting resources on the Launchpad, what you can start doing to plug some of those gaps or to improve those things that you think are doing well. And then I want you to go away and practice. I want you to try them out. I want you to get feedback from your learners. Did you like that? Did that work well? What did you like about that? I want you to talk about it with your colleagues. I tried this. I'm not sure if it worked. Am I doing it right? Even better, can you come in and just see what I'm doing for the first 5 minutes with this vocabulary? And I'm trying to introduce something with words. I'm trying to use these Freya models. I don't know if I'm getting it right. Practice it and then reflect. And reflect again, develop, practice. That is the best way to improve our approach as teachers. That's your follow-up activity task from me today. So that all that's left to say is thank you very much for your time to explore word level component of the SBC Way breakthrough curriculum. We've looked at how it is a holistic literacy approach. You can't separate the 4 components of literacy: writing, reading, listening, and talking. We've explored the 4 parts of word level learning: recognition, knowledge, writing, and choice. We've hopefully become familiar with the progression documentation and how word level learning isn't explicit within the E's and O's and within the benchmarks and within our progressions, but we do have a huge amount of resources to support that granular component part. And hopefully you know where you can go to find more supporting information. The SBC Way Launchpad, and don't forget there's part 2 of this session which goes deeply into systematic synthetic phonics and our approach to that. So thanks also very much for your time. I hope you found it helpful and interesting as you continue to engage with implementing our new SBC Way breakthrough curriculum. It is exciting. You are wonderful. Your children are lucky to have you. Thank you so much for all you do every day. Take care. Goodbye.